Dr. Eliza Chen's hands trembled as she adjusted the quantum calibrator. 4 years of research, 2 denied grants, and her reputation balanced on this single experiment. The particle accelerator hummed to life, its circular chamber glowing with an eerie blue light that cast long shadows across her university lab. Initiating quantum entanglement sequence, she announced to the empty room, a habit from when colleagues still bothered showing up. 3, 2, 1. She pressed the activation switch. The machine's hum deepened to a roar. Then something went catastrophically wrong. Warning lights flashed as the containment field fluctuated wildly. Eliza lunged for the emergency shutdown, but a blinding flash erupted from the chamber. The last thing she saw was a wave of blue energy racing toward her face. Then, impossibility. She was standing at the control panel again. The accelerator hummed normally. The countdown hadn't started. Her watch showed exactly 30 seconds earlier. "What the?" Eliza whispered, heart racing. She stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. A glance at the monitoring equipment showed something impossible. Quantum particles in the chamber were registering before they were introduced to the system. Working on pure instinct, she adjusted the containment field parameters and reinitiated the experiment. This time, it completed successfully, but the data made no sense. Or rather, it made a kind of sense that violated everything she understood about physics. The particles weren't just entangled through space. They were entangled through time. Chen's delusion. They called it 3 months later. The Journal of Quantum Physics rejected her paper with a scathing review suggesting she check her medication. Her department head gently suggested a sabbatical. Former colleagues avoided eye contact in the hallways. In her apartment, now converted to a makeshift lab with equipment borrowed before her lab access was revoked, Eliza worked through another sleepless night. Whiteboard equations covered every wall. Components salvaged from discarded university equipment cluttered every surface. "If traditional measurements can't detect temporal entanglement," she muttered, soldering a final connection on her homemade device, "then we need non-traditional measurement." The temporal observation device, TOD, as she'd affectionately named it, looked like a mess of wires connecting modified sensors to a repurposed MRI display. But it worked. God help her, it actually worked. At first, it could only see minutes into the future, flickering shadows of events yet to happen. But each iteration improved the range. 1 day, 2 days, a week. Then came the morning TOD showed her something that changed everything. Exactly 30 days in the future, at 9:17 am, a massive object materialized over Times Square. The image was grainy but unmistakable, a vessel of some kind, its architecture defying human engineering, hovering silently above panicked crowds. Eliza spent the next week trying to warn someone. Anyone. The FBI agent who finally came to her apartment viewed the footage with professional detachment, promised to look into it, and left. That night, he disappeared from his home, along with all records of his visit. The same happened with the SETI researcher who answered her desperate email. Then the Pentagon official who agreed to a 5-minute meeting. Each person who saw her evidence vanished within 24 hours. The night before the predicted arrival, Eliza packed her research, preparing to flee. She'd just zipped her bag when her front door exploded inward. Black-clad agents swarmed in, weapons drawn. "Dr. Eliza Chen," the lead agent said, "you need to come with us immediately. I'm not going anywhere until—" "The president is waiting, Dr. Chen. And we have approximately 9 hours before your prediction comes true." In an underground bunker beneath the Pentagon, surrounded by military brass and ashen-faced officials, Eliza watched the countdown clock approach 0. Satellite feeds displayed Times Square from multiple angles. At exactly 9:17 am, reality fractured. The air shimmered, then split open like a curtain being torn. Through the dimensional rift emerged a vessel that seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously, crystalline in one moment, liquid-like the next. As every defense system worldwide went offline simultaneously, the alien ship broadcast on all frequencies in perfect English. Greetings, Earth. We are the Continuum. We have traveled across both space and time to meet the human who bent causality. We have come for Dr. Eliza Chen, the first being in the known universe to discover chronometric theory independently. We have questions and warnings. The room erupted into chaos, but Eliza stood frozen, a single thought burning in her mind. They didn't come to invade Earth. They came specifically for her. This isn't a room, Eliza whispered, her voice echoing strangely as she followed the Continuum ambassador through a doorway that seemed to fold in on itself. It's a temporal junction point. The ambassador, a being composed of crystalline segments that continuously shifted position, refracting light into impossible colors, turned what might have been its head. You comprehend already, it said, its voice resonating from multiple points simultaneously. Most species require decades to grasp even basic temporal architecture. The space around them defied Euclidean geometry. Corridors extended in directions that couldn't exist, yet Eliza's mind somehow processed the impossible layout. At the center floated a three-dimensional projection of swirling galaxies. 17 civilizations, the ambassador said, gesturing with appendages that moved through multiple positions at once. All discovered time manipulation only after finding artifacts left by extinct precursors. It touched the display, highlighting a spiral galaxy, the meritocracy of Voss, destroyed when they attempted to prevent their own extinction. Another gesture. The Kin Collective, dissolved into quantum probability when they tried sending messages to their past. More points illuminated. The Targosian Harmony, the Epelian Confluence, all gone. Eliza studied the map, noticing Earth's insignificant position at the galactic rim. And humans, what makes us different? The ambassador's crystalline form pulsed with what might have been anxiety. You intuited temporal mechanics. No artifacts. No guidance. This has never happened before. You conceptualize time incorrectly. You mean differently, Eliza countered. Dangerously, it corrected. Absolutely not. The Chinese ambassador slammed his fist on the United Nations conference table. We will not surrender Dr. Chen to alien custody without guarantees. On view screens worldwide, billions watched the emergency session as representatives from every nation argued over the Continuum's demand for Eliza's immediate extradition to their mothership. After 3 days of non-stop negotiation, a compromise emerged, a research exchange program. 5 human scientists would join the Continuum for 5 years. 5 years of human lives against the possibility of extinction if the aliens were refused. The worldwide selection process became a media spectacle. Thousands of brilliant minds competed for 4 remaining positions alongside Eliza. When the final team was announced at a globally televised ceremony, Eliza met her fellow travelers for the first time. Dr. Hiroshi Takeda, a quantum computing prodigy whose synesthesia allowed him to see computational problems as musical structures. Colonel Maria Santos, a theoretical physicist who'd survived a temporal anomaly during a classified military experiment, the only witness to an event that technically never happened. Professor James Wheeler, a mathematician with terminal cancer who'd volunteered because, as he bluntly put it, I got nothing to lose but a few painful months. And finally, Dr. Nassim Okoro, a controversial cosmologist whose radical theories about the multiverse had made him an academic outcast. 5 brilliant misfits, chosen to represent humanity's understanding of time itself. Hours before departure, in a sterile government facility, Eliza reviewed the Chronos Protocol, the alien regulations governing all temporal research. The document had been transmitted ahead of the Continuum's arrival, its principles deemed non-negotiable. Causality violation stricture. No information transfer exceeding 67 cycles, approximately 43 Earth days, in either temporal direction. Paradox containment mandate. All temporal experimentation must incorporate fail-safe dissolution protocols. Observer continuity requirement. Consciousness must maintain linear progression, regardless of temporal positioning. The equations underpinning these rules seemed familiar yet fundamentally wrong, like music played in a dissonant key. Working through the mathematical proofs, Eliza discovered something the aliens had missed, or deliberately concealed. According to her original calculations, paradoxes didn't collapse reality. They created branching timelines. The realization hit her like a physical blow. If she was right, everything the continuum believed about causality was wrong. As armed guards arrived to escort her to the waiting alien ship, Eliza made a split-second decision. She slipped her original notebooks into a hidden compartment in her luggage, alongside a small device she built in secret, a miniature version of her temporal observer. Dr. Chen, a stone-faced security officer, announced, "Your transport departs in 30 minutes." Eliza nodded, heart racing. She wasn't just joining an exchange program. She was smuggling forbidden knowledge to an advanced alien civilization that might consider her theories an existential threat. If she was right about time, humanity's unique understanding might save them. If she was wrong, she might have just doomed her species to extinction. "Your minds will break," the continuum's chief theorist warned, its form rippling like mercury as it approached the 5 humans strapped to reclined examination chairs. "But we will attempt to minimize the damage." Eliza locked eyes with Colonel Santos, who gave an almost imperceptible nod of reassurance. They had agreed to this procedure, neural interfaces that would allow their human brains to perceive time as the continuum did. "The evolutionary limitations of your species," began the alien. "Just do it," Eliza interrupted. "We understand the risks." The chief theorist placed a crystalline device against Eliza's temple. Pain exploded behind her eyes as microscopic filaments penetrated her brain tissue, binding to her neural pathways. Then reality shattered. Eliza screamed as her consciousness fractured across multiple dimensions. She simultaneously experienced every moment aboard the ship, past, present, future, in a kaleidoscopic assault on her sanity. She watched herself age, decay, rejuvenate in nauseating cycles. She died 17 different deaths while being born anew, all in the same instant. Just as her mind began to unravel, something uniquely human activated, her brain's instinctive need to create narrative from chaos. The incomprehensible information suddenly reorganized into a comprehensible temporal map. Where moments before she'd been drowning in sensory overload, now she could navigate the time stream like reading a complex but intelligible text. To her right, Professor Wheeler convulsed violently, blood streaming from his nose and ears. To her left, Dr. Takeda stared blankly ahead, his mind retreating into catatonia. Only Eliza, Colonel Santos, and Dr. Okoro adapted quickly enough to maintain their sanity. The chief theorist's crystalline form pulsed with what might have been surprise. "Interesting. 3 survivors. We expected none." "This is your greatest achievement." Eliza couldn't keep the disappointment from her voice as she watched the continuum scientists demonstrate their proudest technological marvel, moving a quantum-locked apple precisely 3.8 seconds into the future. The laboratory hummed with energy as the apple vanished, then reappeared on a pedestal 3.8 seconds later, without disrupting the causality field surrounding it. "You don't understand," said the assistant theorist, its translucent appendages gesturing excitedly. "Zero temporal distortion. Perfect causality maintenance. This required 3 centuries of development." "Why only 3.8 seconds?" Eliza asked. "Why not days? Years?" The laboratory fell silent. The chief theorist stepped forward. "The causality threshold cannot be exceeded. 67 cycles, what you would call 4 Earth days, is the absolute limit. Beyond that, paradox cascades become uncontainable." Eliza frowned. "But why? What fundamental principle?" "It is not theory. It is observation," the chief said sharply. 3 civilizations exceeded the threshold. 3 civilizations ceased to exist. Their entire histories erased. Something in the alien's tone triggered Eliza's suspicion. She moved to a transparent display panel and, on impulse, grabbed a stylus. Before anyone could stop her, she sketched a series of equations directly onto the screen. Her parallel causality theory. What if paradoxes don't destroy reality, but create alternate timelines? She explained, drawing branching pathways. What if time isn't singular but inherently multiple? The continuum scientists froze, their crystalline forms vibrating in what Eliza now recognized as extreme agitation. The chief theorist's voice emerged as a harsh whisper. This is the aberration we feared. That night, during the mandated rest cycle, Eliza's door slid open. Colonel Santos slipped inside, followed by Dr. Okoro. Their expressions were grim. "They've placed us under quarantine," Santos whispered. "Our sections of the ship are being isolated." Okoro nodded. "I found something in the archives. Temporal monitoring devices targeting Earth's past. Thousands of them, going back millennia. And I discovered these," Santos added, projecting a hologram from her neural interface. Storage units containing what appeared to be human DNA samples spanning different historical periods. Eliza's blood ran cold as the pieces fell into place. "They've been studying us for centuries, monitoring our development." "Worse," Okoro said. "I found restricted archives requiring biological keys that only humans can activate. Why would they design systems that need human DNA unless they've been dealing with humans for much longer than they've admitted?" Eliza finished. The three scientists exchanged a sober look as the truth dawned on them. They hadn't been invited aboard to collaborate on temporal research. They were specimens being studied for containment, before humanity's dangerous perspective on time could spread throughout the galaxy. A shrill alarm jerked Eliza from sleep. The walls of her quarters pulsed with crimson warning lights as the ship lurched violently, knocking her to the floor. Through her neural interface, she sensed a disturbance in the ship's temporal field. Reality itself seemed to be fluctuating. The door to her quarters slid open, revealing a panicked continuum officer. Its crystalline form vibrated at a frequency Eliza now recognized as extreme distress. "You. Now. Catastrophic breach," it communicated, its translator struggling with the temporal distortions affecting the ship. Eliza sprinted barefoot down corridors that seemed to stretch and contract with each step. Emergency klaxons wailed as crew members phased in and out of existence, their forms temporarily splitting into multiple quantum states. The temporal laboratory doors hissed open to reveal a nightmare scenario. At the center of the main chamber swirled a vortex of fractured timelines, a temporal breach that consumed everything it touched. Continuum scientists frantically operated controls while monitoring the expanding anomaly. "What happened?" Eliza shouted over the cacophony of alarms. The chief theorist turned, its form partially decoherent. "Rogue faction. Attempted information transfer beyond causality threshold. Using your theories." Eliza watched in horror as a junior scientist ventured too close to the breach. Its body dissolved into quantum probability waves. Consciousness dispersed across multiple timelines simultaneously, a fate worse than death. The ship's voice echoed through the chamber. Core implosion in 147 seconds. Temporal containment failing. The continuum's emergency protocols were clearly failing. In fact, each countermeasure seemed to accelerate the breach's expansion. Continuum scientists backed away in terror as their theories crumbled before them. In that moment of chaos, Eliza experienced perfect clarity, a childhood memory surfacing with sudden relevance. Her father had once posed a paradox puzzle. What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? Her 8-year-old self had answered. They surrender their definitions. "Move," Eliza commanded, shoving aside the chief theorist. She commandeered the control interface, her neural implant connecting directly with the ship's systems. "What are you doing?" demanded the assistant theorist. "Our emergency protocols are making it worse," Eliza snapped. "Your fear of paradox is killing you." Sometimes you need to break time to fix it. Her fingers flew across the interface as she reconfigured the temporal stabilizers. We need to create a second breach, a controlled one, precisely calibrated to collide with the first. Impossible, shouted the chief theorist. 2 breaches would cause mutual annihilation, Eliza finished. Fighting fire with fire. Temporal interference patterns will create a cancellation effect. The AI's voice updated. Core implosion in 72 seconds. Colonel Santos appeared at Eliza's side, blood streaming from her nose due to temporal exposure. Tell me what you need, she said simply. Reverse polarity on quantum stabilizers. Redirect power from life support if necessary. The Continuum scientists watched in horror as the humans violated every principle of the Chronos Protocol, creating what their theories predicted would be a universe-ending catastrophe. Core implosion in 30 seconds. Now, Eliza whispered, activating the second breach. A smaller controlled temporal vortex formed opposite the first, its rotation precisely inverse to the rogue anomaly. Time seemed to stop as the 2 breaches collided. Instead of the expected universal collapse, the anomalies spiraled toward each other like cosmic dancers, their energies interweaving in complex patterns. The ship shuddered as space-time warped around them. Then, silence. Where 2 catastrophic breaches had raged moments before, now existed a stable, gently pulsing nexus point. The emergency systems powered down. Gravity normalized. The chief theorist approached the stabilized phenomenon, its crystalline form vibrating with what might have been awe or fear. Impossible, it whispered, studying the readings. You created controlled chaos, balanced instability. As emergency recovery began, Eliza caught Colonel Santos' eye. Something fundamental had just changed in their relationship with the continuum. The aliens now looked at the humans with new respect and unmistakable dread. Meanwhile, in the ship's restricted archives, Dr. Okoro made another discovery. Star charts mapping temporal disturbances originating from Earth's future, disturbances that had drawn the continuum to humanity in the first place. Temporal shock waves from experiments humans hadn't conducted yet. The loop was closing. Access granted, chimed the security system as the crystalline door responded to Eliza's palm print. After saving the ship from temporal collapse, she'd been rewarded with unprecedented clearance. Access to the continuum's most restricted archives. The circular chamber illuminated as she entered, its walls lined with what appeared to be data crystals pulsing with internal light. At the center stood a geometric structure that defied Euclidean logic, a data core designed specifically for temporal record-keeping. Eliza approached cautiously, recalling Dr. Okoro's discovery about biological keys. She placed her hand on the interface panel. Nothing happened. Curious, she muttered, then on impulse, pricked her finger on a small protrusion. A drop of blood fell onto the surface. The chamber transformed instantly. The walls became transparent, revealing a vast multidimensional display of intertwining timelines, Earth's history rendered as luminous strands of light. But not one strand, 17 distinct timelines, each terminating abruptly at different points in humanity's technological development. Eliza staggered backward as comprehension dawned. These weren't simulations. They were records of actual alternative Earth histories, each one reset at precisely the moment humans developed true time travel. She watched, horrified, as civilizations rose and fell across the 17 strands. In one, the Roman Empire never collapsed. In another, the Black Death killed 90% of Europe. In a third, the American Revolution failed. Yet in each, despite radically different historical paths, humans eventually discovered temporal mechanics, only to have their timeline pruned like an unwanted branch. "We are on the 18th attempt," came a voice from behind her. Eliza whirled to find the chief theorist standing in the doorway, its crystalline form now partially transparent with age. "You've been resetting our timeline," she accused, anger overwhelming fear. "Committing serial genocide whenever we approached temporal travel." "Yes," the alien replied simply. How dare you decide? We detected your approach, the chief theorist continued, as if she hadn't spoken. Your species radiates a unique temporal signature when approaching the breakthrough point. The 17th attempt progressed furthest. They created a functional temporal displacement device capable of sending consciousness back 30 years. The alien moved closer, activating a specific section of the display. Observe the consequences. Eliza watched as a brilliant light emerged from Earth, spreading outward like a shockwave. 2 neighboring star systems flickered and vanished as the temporal distortion engulfed them. 18 billion sentient beings, the alien said quietly. 2 civilizations that had never developed temporal mechanics, erased because your species cannot follow the fundamental laws of causality. Eliza's rage deflated, replaced by horror. We did that. In timeline 17 and 14. In timeline 6, the distortion reached the galactic core before we managed to implement a reset. But why does this keep happening? Why do humans consistently reject temporal laws that other species instinctively follow? The chief theorist hesitated, then activated the chamber's security lockdown. When it spoke again, its translator conveyed a tone almost like reverence. You must understand, the Council would terminate me for sharing this information. But after your solution to the breach, perhaps it is time. The alien's form shifted, revealing its true appearance. A being so ancient its physical structure had begun decoherent into pure temporal energy, held together only by will. Human consciousness operates partially outside normal spacetime constraints, it said. Your brains exist simultaneously in multiple quantum states, what you might call a biological superposition. That's impossible, Eliza protested. We're just carbon-based. You are the first evolutionary adaptation to temporal manipulation in universal history, the Ancient One continued. Your species developed quantum consciousness as a defense mechanism, allowing you to survive paradoxes that liquefy other species' neural tissue. The being moved closer, its voice dropping to a whisper that seemed to reverberate through multiple timelines simultaneously. You aren't being contained because you're dangerous, Dr. Chen. You're being contained because you are the next stage of universal evolution. And we, the continuum, the self-proclaimed guardians of time, are obsolete. The display shifted, showing the 18th timeline, the current one, blinking dangerously close to the familiar point of termination. And now, the Ancient One said, the Council has detected your breakthrough. They are preparing the 19th reset even as we speak. This might actually work, Colonel Santos muttered, adjusting power conduits in the makeshift laboratory they'd established in a repurposed maintenance bay. 3 weeks had passed since Eliza's discovery in the archives. The 3 surviving humans now worked in secret, protected by a small faction of sympathetic continuum scientists who believed the cycle of resets had to end. Eliza stood before a holographic display showing their creation, the paradox engine. Unlike conventional temporal technology that avoided paradoxes at all costs, this revolutionary device deliberately generated controlled temporal contradictions, the fundamental error in existing temporal theory. Eliza explained to their alien collaborators, is treating paradoxes as system failures rather than power sources. She manipulated the display, highlighting the engine's core. When alternate timelines form, they release massive energy. Energy we can harness to propel travelers beyond the causality threshold. Dr. Okoro looked up from his calculations. If our math is correct, we could potentially reach 200 years in either direction, while maintaining consciousness integrity. The continuum scientists' crystalline forms vibrated with something between fascination and horror as they witnessed the heretical device take shape. One of them, a young theorist named Nexus, placed a component into the engine's housing. My ancestors helped reset your civilization twice, it said quietly. Perhaps it is time for atonement. Eliza worked through the night, making final calibrations for their first test run. Tomorrow they would attempt to send a quantum-entangled particle 5 months into the past, well beyond the 43-day causality threshold. The door to the lab slid open unexpectedly. Eliza looked up to see the ancient Continuum Elder who had revealed the truth about human consciousness. "Emergency council session," it announced, its form flickering with agitation. "You must come now." The council chamber's massive view screens displayed chaos. Earth cities appeared in multiple states simultaneously, some modern, some from different historical periods, some showing futuristic architecture never built. "What are we seeing?" Eliza demanded. The council leader's form pulsed with barely controlled panic. Temporal weapons, detonating in major population centers, creating localized history bubbles where past events are being violently rewritten. The screens shifted to show a terrorist compound in what appeared to be the Swiss Alps. Inside, familiar equipment, cruder versions of Eliza's original temporal observation device. "They're using my early prototypes," she whispered in horror. "How?" "Industrial espionage," Colonel Santos said grimly. "Your research was stolen before we left Earth. We were briefed but instructed not to tell you. They feared it would compromise your cooperation." Nexus approached with new data. "Analysis confirms they've modified your technology to selectively edit historical events. They've already erased 3 political assassinations, rewritten the outcome of 2 regional conflicts, and altered the results of 17 democratic elections." The council leader's voice cut through the commotion. "We have voted. 11-1. The sanction is approved." It turned to face Eliza directly. "We have no choice but to implement immediate timeline termination of Earth's history branch." On a tactical display, Eliza watched as temporal eraser ships detached from the Continuum fleet, vessels designed for one purpose: to surgically remove an entire causality line from existence. "You can't," she shouted. "There are billions of innocent people who will cease to exist painlessly," the leader replied. "Then we will attempt the 19th iteration, with stricter containment protocols." Something inside Eliza snapped. She stormed to the center of the council chamber, her neural interface projecting the Paradox engine schematics for all to see. "You've reset our timeline 17 times, she challenged, "and we keep reaching this same point. Your approach fails by definition." She expanded the display to show the engine's capabilities. "Let us use our device. My team can return to Earth and prevent the technology theft before it happens." "And why would this attempt differ from previous interventions?" the leader asked coldly. Eliza activated a holographic projection showing mathematical proof of what she'd suspected since discovering the multiple timelines. Probability equations demonstrating that the universe itself was protecting humanity from permanent erasure. "We're not just another species," she argued, her voice rising with conviction. "We're the universe's immune response to something far worse than paradoxes, something only humans are evolved to fight." The view screen suddenly flashed red as more temporal weapons detonated across Earth. "Countdown engaged," announced the ship's eye. "Timeline erasure in 64 minutes. The ancient elder who had first revealed the truth to Eliza moved to her side, addressing the council. "I vote we grant them this chance. After 18 failures, perhaps it is time to consider that our approach is flawed." The council leader's form dimmed in resignation. "One opportunity, Dr. Chen. Fail, and we implement immediate erasure." The Paradox engine hummed with impossible energy, its core pulsing with controlled temporal contradictions. Eliza, Colonel Santos, and Dr. Okoro stood within the activation chamber, their bodies encased in protective fields designed to maintain neural cohesion during transit. 30 seconds to activation, announced Nexus from the control station. "Timeline erasure in 53 minutes if you fail." Eliza's heart raced. The device they'd built violated every principle of the Chronos Protocol, yet represented humanity's only hope. "Remember," she told her companions, "we locate the theft point, prevent the data from being stolen, and return immediately. No other interventions, no matter what we see." The chamber filled with scintillating light as the engine harvested energy from micro-paradoxes, converting timeline divergence into propulsion power. "Activation. Nexus announced. Reality shattered. Eliza felt her consciousness ripped from her body and hurled through a psychedelic maelstrom of fragmenting realities. Past, present, and future crashed together like colliding galaxies as they traversed the forbidden territory beyond the causality threshold. They materialized in Washington, D.C., specifically in the Oval Office. But something was catastrophically wrong. 3 different presidents occupied the same space simultaneously, each partially transparent, each believing they legitimately won the same election. None acknowledged the other's existence, yet all were signing different versions of the same executive order. Timeline fracture, Dr. Okoro whispered, checking his temporal scanner. Far worse than we anticipated. They moved to the window. Outside, Washington, D.C. existed in quantum superposition, parts modern metropolis, parts colonial-era settlement, parts futuristic arcology. Citizens walked through streets that simultaneously existed in different centuries, unaware of the temporal chaos surrounding them. The terrorists didn't just steal my research, Eliza realized with growing horror. They've created a temporal patchwork by strategically editing pivotal historical moments. A shimmering distortion caught her eye. Something moving through the chaos like oil on water. The entity had no fixed shape, its form constantly shifting between geometric patterns that hurt the human mind to observe. Chronophage, Colonel Santos whispered, raising her weapon instinctively. The predatory entity paused, sensing their presence. More shimmers appeared throughout the fractured cityscape. Dozens, then hundreds of the temporal predators, drawn to the paradox energy saturating the area. Dr. Okoro's scanner blared a warning. They're consuming the inconsistencies, and the people caught in them. Historical figures are being retroactively erased from existence. Eliza watched as a man walking down Pennsylvania Avenue suddenly vanished, not just disappearing, but being unwritten from history itself. The people around him didn't react, their memories instantly adjusting to a reality where he had never existed. We need to find the terrorist base, Colonel Santos urged. The original mission is irrelevant now, Eliza interrupted, a counterintuitive realization forming. This isn't just about stolen research anymore. She studied the chronophage's feeding patterns, noting how they targeted areas of sharp temporal division. An insight struck her with sudden clarity. The continuum's rigid temporal laws have made the galaxy vulnerable, she explained rapidly. By creating sharp distinctions between correct and paradoxical states of time, they've created perfect feeding grounds for these predators. A chronophage noticed them, a being from outside conventional space-time, recognizing something familiar in their neural patterns. It changed direction, moving toward them with predatory intent. What's your plan? Santos demanded, backing away from the approaching entity. Eliza accessed the portable version of the paradox engine they'd brought along. Humanity's supposed weakness, our comfort with contradiction and ability to hold incompatible ideas simultaneously, might be our salvation. She began reprogramming the device against the screaming objections of their continuum liaison, communicating through their neural interfaces. We're not trying to fix the paradoxes, she explained while working. That's the mistake everyone makes. We're going to domesticate them, create a deliberate web of minor, controlled paradoxes around the major fractures. That violates every principle of temporal mechanics. Dr. Okoro protested. Exactly. Eliza replied with grim determination. We're building a paradox immune system, not to eliminate contradictions, but to make them part of a balanced temporal ecology. The approaching chronophage paused, sensing the change in the local time stream, as Eliza activated the modified engine. The device began generating precisely calculated micro-paradoxes, contradictions too small to cause damage, but numerous enough to form a complex pattern. It's working, Santos whispered as the predator retreated, confused by the unfamiliar temporal structure. Eliza nodded grimly. Now we need to scale this up, to the entire planet. The sky above Earth tore open like tissue paper as millions of chronophages now evolved into city-sized predatory geometries. converged from higher dimensions. Their impossible forms cast shadows that didn't match their shapes as they descended toward the feast of temporal contradictions below. On a hastily constructed temporal nexus platform hovering over the fractured Washington Monument, Eliza made the final adjustments to what she'd named the human equation. Around her, Colonel Santos directed a team of recruited temporal physicists, while Dr. Okoro calibrated the worldwide network of paradox generators they'd deployed over the past 36 hours. Continuum vessels entering orbit, Santos reported, checking her neural interface. Timeline erasure capacity charging. Eliza nodded grimly. Only 17 minutes remained before the Continuum would implement their extinction protocol. Final calibration complete, Dr. Okoro announced. Network synchronized. Eliza took a deep breath. Activate the equation. Okoro pressed his palm against the crystalline interface. The device pulsed once, then began emitting waves of carefully structured temporal energy, not eliminating paradoxes, but systematically organizing them into balanced patterns. Across the globe, reality itself began pulsing with a new rhythm. Rather than trying to force time back into a single correct flow, the human equation created a self-sustaining temporal ecosystem where contradictions continuously arose and resolved in perfect balance. Timeline homeostasis. The effect spread outward from each generator, connecting into a planetary network. Where opposing histories collided, they now flowed around each other like currents in a stream, neither erasing the other, but existing in dynamic equilibrium. Above, the chronophages reacted with visible confusion. They slammed against this new temporal construct like waves against stone. Their feeding mechanisms evolved for feast or famine paradox events, not this steady-state system where contradictions existed in perpetual balance. They can't feed on it, Santos whispered in awe. The pattern is too coherent. The massive predators thrashed in frustration, their city-sized forms contorting into increasingly desperate configurations. One by one, they began withdrawing, retreating back to the higher dimensions they'd emerged from. In orbit, the Continuum Armada held position, temporal erasers fully charged but not firing. Their sensors detected the unprecedented phenomenon unfolding below. Hundreds of thousands of controlled paradoxes operating in perfect harmony. A transmission came through Eliza's neural interface. Temporal erasure suspended pending evaluation. Maintain current configuration. Moments later, a familiar figure materialized on the platform. The ancient Continuum Elder, its form now barely holding coherence as it shifted through past and future versions of itself simultaneously. We feared this day, it admitted, observing the balanced time streams flowing around them. Humans aren't merely another species discovering time travel. You're what comes after us. The Elder moved to the edge of the platform, gazing down at the city where multiple histories now coexisted peacefully. The universe's evolutionary response to the chronophages, a species born to domesticate chaos rather than fight it. 20 years later, Eliza stood before the newly formed Temporal Guardianship Council, a multi-species initiative headquartered in Geneva. Representatives from 17 civilizations, including reformed elements of the Continuum, had gathered to witness the official replacement of the rigid Chronos Protocol with the adaptive framework Eliza had developed. Her hair now silver, her face lined with experience, she addressed the assembly. For millennia, we approached time as a fragile medium requiring strict protection. We now understand it as a resilient ecosystem requiring balanced stewardship. On holographic displays, a new generation of temporal theorists from a dozen worlds studied the principles of the human equation, learning not to fear contradiction, but to integrate it into the cosmic fabric. Our greatest gift to the universe, Eliza concluded, activating a final display showing galaxies pulsing with the new temporal rhythm. Immune to predation, eternally dynamic, wasn't technological but philosophical. We taught beings billions of years our senior that time, like consciousness, like life itself, isn't meant to be perfectly ordered, but adaptively chaotic. constantly breaking and remaking itself through contradiction. She looked out at the assembly of species once terrified of timeline disruption, now thriving within a new understanding of temporal mechanics. That, she said with quiet pride, is humanity's true legacy. We didn't conquer time. We set it free.